People think the scariest moment of their life comes with warning signs, but mine arrived quietly inside a grocery store with a stranger whispering in my ear that someone had been following me for the last 20 minutes. I turned, heart steady but alert. An elderly woman with soft gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes leaned close and said, "The person behind you. Don't look too fast. He's been following you from aisle to aisle." I blinked, pretending to check a shelf, and casually glanced back. Three people behind us stood: a tall man, dark hair, blue jacket, exactly as she described. He was staring at his phone, but his stillness felt intentional, too controlled to be casual. I thanked the woman quietly. She nodded like she'd done her duty and slipped away. My instincts sharpened. At the cashier, I paid quickly, keeping him in my peripheral vision. He stepped into the line behind me, still not looking at me. Maybe the woman was confused. Maybe it was nothing. But fear has a way of grabbing your spine and whispering, "Pay attention!" Outside, I walked faster than usual, loading my groceries into the car. My hands didn't shake, but my breath sat higher in my chest. During the drive home, I kept checking my mirrors. Left, right, rear. No blue jacket, no car following me, just my imagination building shadows in the daylight. When I reached my apartment, I grabbed only the essentials: milk, eggs, bread, too unsettled to care about the rest. As I unlocked my door, my phone rang. A name appeared I hadn't seen in 3 years. Nathaniel, my ex, a ghost from college. He said he needed to talk, urgently. Hesitant but curious, I agreed to meet him at the park near the library on Wednesday. There was something in his voice, tight, uneasy, that made me say yes. When Wednesday came, I arrived early and sat by the fountain. Nathaniel appeared exactly on the minute, wearing sunglasses even though the sky was nothing but thick gray clouds. He hugged me lightly, uncertainly, and thanked me for coming. He said he'd been struggling with how to approach me. I told him texting would have been a start. He smiled weakly, then took off his sunglasses, and everything about the way he looked at me shifted. Serious, heavy, careful. Then he said the words that twisted my stomach into knots. "I saw something at your sister's wedding last month." I froze. Anne's wedding, the one he wasn't invited to. I asked him how he was even there, and he explained his cousin had brought him as a +1. Fine. Strange, but fine. But then he said something impossible. He said he'd seen my mother. I laughed at him, actually laughed. A sharp, annoyed, disbelieving sound. I told him that was impossible. My mother had died when I was 12. I had gone to her funeral. I had lived years with that grief carved into me, but Nathaniel didn't flinch. He said he knew what my mother looked like from the pictures I once kept on my dorm room shelf. And the woman at table 8? That was her. He swore on it. He said she even looked at him, recognized him. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stood up, ready to walk away from him, from this ridiculous conversation. But the certainty in his voice followed me like a shadow. I drove across town without thinking, straight to Anne's house. She opened the door in pajamas, hair messy like she'd just woken from a nap. The moment she saw my face, she sobered. I told her about Nathaniel, about what he claimed. Anne went pale, so pale it scared me. She whispered that he must be wrong, but her voice cracked. And then she broke. She told me Mom didn't die in that accident. Dad made it up. There had been no car crash, no body, no tragedy, just a lie so big it swallowed our entire childhood. I felt the world tilt as she said it. Mom didn't die. She left. I walked out of Anne's apartment without a jacket, without my keys in my hand, without fully understanding how my legs were even moving. The air outside felt colder than it should have, the kind of cold that comes from shock, not weather. I drove straight to Dad's house, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. When he opened the door, he took one look at me and knew. His shoulders dropped the way a man's do when the truth he's buried finally claws its way back into daylight. I asked him how he could lie to his daughters about something so cruel, so permanent. He didn't defend himself. He just sighed and said, "Your mother abandoned us for another man. I thought it would be easier for you girls to think she died a hero than to know she chose a different life." My stomach twisted. He said it like he'd been protecting us, like a lie that big was mercy instead of manipulation. I sat with him for hours, asking questions I never thought existed. What she was like before she left. Whether she ever tried to come back. Whether he'd ever regretted lying. The sun dipped behind the houses, shadows stretched across the room, and I felt a strange numbness settle over me. When I finally left, I drove without direction until the supermarket's fluorescent lights pulled me in like a moth. I walked through the aisles aimlessly, picking up random items just to feel busy. And then, dairy aisle, my world stopped. A woman with familiar eyes was staring at tubs of Greek yogurt. My breath caught so violently it hurt. Older, yes. Different hairstyle, yes. But the eyes, those were my mother's eyes, the same green as mine, the same slight squint, the same softness I'd memorized from childhood photos. She turned her head and froze. For 10 solid seconds, we stared at each other, both of us hit by a tidal wave of recognition, so strong it felt supernatural. Then she placed the yogurt back, adjusted her purse, and walked toward the exit. Not fast, not rushed, just retreating. I followed her, not sneaky, not hesitant. I jogged behind her and called out one word I never thought I'd speak again. Mom! She stopped. Her shoulders trembled, but she didn't turn right away. When she finally faced me, I saw tears forming. I saw guilt, fear, love, every emotion she'd buried for 13 years. She asked how I'd been. I laughed, a jagged, broken, hysterical laugh that made strangers stare. How have I been? Oh, fantastic. Just found out my dead mother is walking around buying yogurt. She flinched like the words cut her. Then she whispered, "Can we go somewhere to talk?" A part of me wanted to walk away, to let her feel a fraction of the abandonment she'd left me with. But another part, a louder, sharper, desperate part, needed answers more than revenge. We ended up at a 24-hour diner with sticky menus and neon lights flickering overhead. She ordered coffee. I ordered Coke, because nothing about this moment deserved warmth. She said she didn't know I'd be at the wedding. I told her Anne invited her. She nodded, embarrassed, small, and explained Troy's mother had mailed the invitation to her current address. Current address. As in, she'd been living close enough to get mail about my sister's wedding. Harrisburg, she said quietly. 90 minutes away, for 13 years. Anger rose inside me so fast it tasted metallic. I told her everything she'd destroyed, the years I'd spent crying myself to sleep, the nightmares, the therapy, the guilt, the empty seat at every birthday, the ache I'd mistaken for grief when it was actually abandonment. She started crying, not soft, delicate tears, but raw, choking sobs that made the waitress back away from our booth like she'd walked into a crime scene. She said she never meant for things to go this far. She said leaving was supposed to be temporary. She said she was suffocating with Dad. She said she needed to find herself. I asked when she planned to return. She went silent. Then she admitted she had an affair before she left. A man named Timothy. Dad hadn't lied about everything, apparently. But Timothy left her within a year, and life spiraled. She said Dad told her if she ever came back, he'd make sure we hated her. I asked why she believed him, why she didn't fight for us. She said she thought staying away was less painful than being rejected. Every word felt like an emotional punch. Then she revealed something that took my breath. She tried to contact me once, when I was 16, sent a letter Dad returned unopened, made a call he hung up on. She even drove by my high school one afternoon, saw me laughing with friends, and convinced herself I didn't need her. "You don't get to decide that," I snapped. "You don't get to watch me from a car window and choose for me." She nodded through tears, calling herself a coward. And then, another blow, she admitted that Anne had reached out to her 3 years ago. They'd been communicating behind my back all this time. Something cracked in me right then. Not just anger, betrayal. Deep, suffocating betrayal. I left the diner shaking and drove straight to Anne's. She answered the door half asleep and froze when she saw my face. I told her everything. She cried, saying she only meant to protect me. that mom was fragile, that mom had tried to end her life twice. So apparently, my emotions didn't matter, only mom's. I told Anne I needed space and left. When I got home, Nathaniel had messaged me. I called him, needing someone who wasn't lying to me. He told me everything he'd seen at the wedding, how he'd recognized her, how he'd pointed her out to his cousin, how he'd tried to tell me years ago. I felt exhausted, like every truth had teeth. And then the final punch that kept me awake all night. Dad called. He said Mom had reached out to him last night, wanting to make amends. He told her to stay away from me, said he'd let her see Anne, but not me. That was the moment I realized both my parents thought they owned my emotional life. Everyone had an agenda. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted to shape the outcome, but nobody, absolutely nobody, had asked what I wanted. And as if fate wasn't done messing with me, the moment I walked out of the diner that night, someone was standing in the parking lot. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of dread that settles deep in your spine. The comments on my earlier post were blowing up. People theorizing that the blue jacket guy was a detective, a stalker, a hallucination, my long-lost stepbrother. Turns out, one of those guesses wasn't far off. I called my mother, told her we needed to talk now. She asked if she could bring someone. My nerves were fried, so I just said yes. An hour later, she knocked on my door with a teenage boy standing beside her. Tall, awkward, dark-haired, the same dark hair that the man at Costco had, the same shape of eyes, the same uncertain posture. He looked like he wanted to vaporize on the spot. The first thing he said was, "I'm sorry for being a creep." His voice cracked when he said it. He explained he'd been trying for weeks to talk to me, to introduce himself, but every time he got close, he panicked. That day at Costco, he had finally worked up the courage, and the elderly woman had blown his cover. I stared at him, then at my mother, waiting for her to say it out loud. She did. His name was Sidney. He was my brother. Born 2 years after she left us, raised alone after his father, Ronald, bailed, living an hour and a half away for over a decade. I looked at Sidney again, trying to match this quiet, trembling teenage boy to my anger, my confusion, my entire unraveling, and for the first time, I didn't feel fury. I felt recognition. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't part of some mystery. He was just a kid who'd grown up hearing about the sisters he wasn't allowed to meet. Ghost siblings. That's what he called us. He said it softly, like he wasn't sure he should say it at all. Something inside me cracked, because that was exactly how I'd lived, haunted by a mother still breathing somewhere I could never reach. We were all haunted, all waiting, all hurting. Sidney wasn't the villain of this story. He was another victim of it. I texted Anne immediately and told her to get to my place. When she arrived and saw him, she stopped breathing for a moment. Then she whispered, "Holy, we have a brother." Sidney laughed nervously. "Surprise!" What followed didn't feel like a dramatic reunion. It felt like a dam breaking. We sat cross-legged on my living room floor, eating Chinese takeout, listening to Sidney talk about school and video games and how he always wondered if he looked like us. My mother watched us with a trembling smile, eyes shining with a mixture of pride and grief, like she was staring at a life she'd once had and thought she'd never see again. Over the next few weeks, things shifted, slowly, clumsily, painfully, but real. Sidney and my mother came down on weekends. We tried being siblings. We tried being daughters. We tried being a family. Nothing was perfect, but everything was better than before. Eventually, Anne and I decided we needed to loop Dad into all of this. Not to punish him, not to reopen old wounds, but to give him the truth. To let him see what we were choosing. He came to dinner at Anne's. He walked in and froze when he saw my mother. But he didn't leave. He sat down because he saw something bigger than their broken marriage. He saw his daughters trying to stitch their lives back together. The conversation was painful and messy. Accusations, defenses, old hurt, new hurt, truths no longer hidden. But somewhere in that storm, something softened. Sidney asked Dad if he'd teach him woodworking one day. Dad hesitated, then said yes. Not forgiveness, but a beginning. From that point forward, our lives started expanding instead of shrinking. Sunday dinners became a tradition. Sometimes mom joined us, sometimes dad, sometimes both, sitting at opposite ends of the table like two planets learning how not to collide. Sydney fit into our lives like he'd been missing from a puzzle we didn't know was incomplete. He and Anne bickered like real siblings within a month. He and I bonded over escape rooms and overthinking things. Mom watched us with a kind of awe, like she was witnessing a miracle she didn't deserve. Maybe she didn't, but she was trying, and for the first time, I wasn't trying to punish her for every mistake. I was trying to understand her humanity. The truth is, adults fail too. Adults run. Adults break. Adults lie. Adults collapse under the weight of their own fear. And sometimes, if they're lucky, they get a second chance. The real breakthrough came on the day of the big family barbecue. Dad and Mom stood 10 feet apart by the grill at first, awkward and stiff. But as the afternoon turned into evening, the ice finally began to crack. Dad talked about retirement, Mom talked about her cat, Button, Sydney talked about school, Anne talked about her nursing shifts. I sat there watching all of them, realizing that this moment, this messy, imperfect gathering, was something I thought I'd never have again. A family, a real one, not a perfect one, but a present one. The months that followed stitched us closer. A little more trust, a little more honesty, a little more healing each week. And then last week, something happened that made every painful step worth it. My birthday, my mother, my alive mother, showed up early with a cake she'd baked herself. Chocolate with raspberry filling. My favorite. The one she used to make when I was little. The one she remembered. We lit candles. We laughed. And we took a family photo, our first real family photo in 13 years. Dad on one side, Mom on the other, Anne, Troy, Sydney, and me in the middle. I printed that photo, stuck it on my fridge, and every morning since I've looked at it before leaving the house, because a stranger at Costco whispered a warning and set off a chain reaction that brought my entire life back to me. A mother, a brother, a family I thought I'd buried. Sometimes the universe doesn't break you. Sometimes it rearranges you. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, it gives you back everything you thought you lost.